Hey, long time no see. I know it's been a long time since I uploaded. What's it been, like a year and a half? Crazy. A lot of personal stuff has been going on, but that doesn't really matter to what we're going to be talking about today. Yeah, we're not doing a movie review this time. Crazy. This time we're actually doing a book review. So there's going to be almost no graphics in this video because I don't think people would like it if I just showed pictures of the text. That would get boring very, 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 very fast. So, the object we're going to be talking about today is a book called The Freedom Writer's Diary by Aaron Gruel and a whole bunch of other students who I know little to know the names of because they're not in the book, and we'll get to that later. Oh, and just to make sure I clarify this correctly, I am totally not being forced against my own will to review this because I love books so much. We good? Good. So The Freedom Writer's Diary is about this group of students and this teacher set around the mid-1990s in California, and they are essentially just bottom of the barrel, at-risk dropout students, don't have good grades, don't really have any future prospects, in most cases don't really have any support networks, and along comes this teacher and she effectively inspires them to become better and become freedom writers, which is a parody itself on the Freedom Writers. Obviously there aren't going to be any spoilers for those who have not read the book because I like being generous like that. This book is going to be hard to talk about, mainly because while it is told in a mostly linear order, there is no real central protagonist. While there technically is, as the teacher, Miss Erin Gruel, she only really has a couple of diary entries because this is told in the form of diary entries. It's only like maybe 6 or 7 out of the 300 or so pages in this book. And it's really not that long. The rest of it is actually told through the perspective of her students as they progress throughout their career in high school from 1994 up until 1998. And we get to hear all their differing perspectives about certain events that they do in order to become better students or just to raise awareness for all of those kids who are at risk or feel like they are alone and isolated. Now, even though this is not a movie review, I'm still going to be formatting it just like my other movie reviews. So let's talk about all the stuff I liked about the book. As previously said, this book is set in 1990s California, where racial tensions and discrimination were at their peak. And I'm letting you know right now, I am not an expert on this topic. In fact, I am the last person you should be going to with information on this topic. Go to Google, go to Wikipedia, read another book about it, or even this book to get some context. I am not that guy.
You're not that guy, pal. Trust me. You're not that guy.
It is legitimately heartbreaking to hear about what some of these students had to go through throughout their high school careers. Not even just in the schools, but what they were dealing with in their personal lives. Now, I'm not going to give in-depth detail as to every student's plight because there are close to 150 diary entries and it can be hard to memorize all in one go. A lot of them have to deal with abusive partners, abusive families, child protective services, homelessness, drugs, alcohol, failing in school, getting beat up by other minorities, racists, or gangs, and it's just terrible. There was just this one point early on in the story, I think it might have been a third of the way through, where I just kind of read something and then I kind of needed to take a step back and I was like, ooh, I think I just need a minute to process that because that's some heavy shit. And in that, there are certain points throughout the story where you kind of forget that they are just kids going through this. They're not adults. They're pretty young. And when you come to that realization again, it actually makes everything you've thought about and how badly you felt 1,000 times worse because you know that no kid should have to go through what these kids have gone through, like the death of a loved one or a friend or a parent in a gang shooting or cancer or anything like that. And it is just heartbreaking. But using their own personal diary entries that they wrote, they're able to take their pain and suffering and twist it into something better, because throughout the story, you see these actual people evolve and better themselves throughout their time in this teacher's class throughout 4 years of their early lives. And they're able to have so many connections to other pieces of literature, like The Color Purple or The Catcher in the Rye, or they even relate it to certain real people, which I'm not going to say who, because it does become an intricate part of the story near the second half. But rest assured, when they describe the connections between how they feel in their lives and how they perceive these real world events and people to have experienced their own tragedies, you really feel the hurt and the pain that they're feeling, even though you're not the one experiencing it. And even in that, even through all their pain and tragedies, they end up becoming one of the most popular classes throughout all of America, and they inspire so many people. They end up on billboards or newspapers or talk shows, and they talk about their struggles, and they talk about how they don't want these future kids and future generations to have to grow up in these environments that they went through and to have better lives. I already said this. I have no idea what this period of time in 1990s California was like. I wasn't even born in the 90s. So the only information I know or have access to is what is on Google or what I am reading in this book. And what this book does so well is just taking so many different perspectives from so many different individuals and helping you paint this picture of this period of time, and actually being able to hear their first-hand accounts of what it was like in this time and how they felt growing up in this particular area, more so than so many other books that are based on true stories or set in reality, actually makes me understand the plight that these kids are going through. And the thing I absolutely love about this book is how it shows just the passion and the will of the human spirit and our need to better ourselves and to get along and fight for a better tomorrow. Which really made me sad when I got near the end of the book and there was one passage which I can't exactly recall word for word off the top of my head, but in that passage, one of the students was talking about how they hope that with their experiences, it can lead to a better future 20, 30 years from now, and how hopefully it could just lead to world peace and the end of so many people suffering. And since this book was published in 1999, it's been close to 25 years later, and in some respects, the world has gotten a lot better, and in others, it honestly feels like it's getting worse. And that just really made me sad to think about that almost 30 years have elapsed since that particular student said that particular phrase, and we're not anywhere near world peace. Now the question is, can world peace ever be attainable? Probably not 100%, but I do think we can get to a point where racism and discrimination are going to be the minority, not the midpoint or even the majority like it was in the past. But I think their efforts to create a better tomorrow are very, very admirable. And I absolutely applaud these students and their teacher, Miss Erin Gruhl, for just stepping up and saying, no, this cannot be the status quo. We need to break the mold and be better for our future generations. Now, if I did have any critiques in this story, I do have one particular, although this isn't really their fault. I understand why. In the diary entries, there is no student name. It's just a student number to protect their anonymity. But it does get to a point where you kind of think to yourself, I do kind of wish we got follow-up passages to passages we read earlier. Or if you're not entirely sure if it is a follow-up passage to something you read earlier, or if it's from a new student, although I think all of them are from new students. But that really is just a minor nitpick. Like, I understand why they didn't do that. It's pretty reasonable that they want to protect their identities. So I'm really not going to hold that against them, because they shouldn't deserve to have their identities released online if they don't want to. Or in this case, on book form and then online. One passage I did find a little weird is there's a passage near the end of the book where it talks about the Columbine shooting. And there's one point where they say how the freedom writers, the actual students who were in this book, say they didn't villainize the shooters of Columbine as much as the rest of the world because they were able to understand their plight and why they felt neglected. And now, while on the surface, I get it, because in this book, they are outcasts. And after doing a bit of research on the shooters from that event, it also does appear that they were outcasts. But the people in this book also didn't commit mass murder of 13 people and wound another 24 after the fact, which I think people at that point have a right to villainize people who do that kind of stuff, because the people who are affected by school shootings are families, friends, loved ones. So that was a little bit weird. Like, there is a message after that. After that shooting, these group of people and other people tried to step up after and show other people in other high schools that shootings and taking things out on other people is not the way, which I totally agree with. Like, violence like that is never the answer, especially if you feel left out, which it happens to people all the time, but it's on differing degrees. So I'm not going to try to get into that too much, but it's just so you know. That's really my only other moment in the story, but I digress. It is such a small moment. Weird, but small. And as I said, the edition of the book I read is the 10th anniversary edition, in which some of the students actually write about their lives over the past 10 years since the original events of the book ended in 1998, and how they've progressed throughout life until 2009. But I do find it very interesting to see where some of these people at least ended up in life. And they also do talk about how they made a movie adaptation of this book. And coincidentally enough, I actually saw the movie adaptation of this before I read the book 5 years ago. So will I do a movie review on this or a comparison to the book? Maybe. Maybe I will. Maybe I won't. I don't control the rate at which I upload, or I'm a lazy bastard. So we'll see where that goes. Maybe next week. I make no promises, though. So that was my review of The Freedom Writer's Diary by teacher Erin Gruhl and almost 150 of her students, which is kind of crazy that there's over 150 authors for this one book. If I had to give this a rating, which it looks like I'm going to have to, I would say this is a solid 8.7 out of 10. Aside from those few nitpicks, I do think this is a very fascinating, very intriguing topic to read about. There are points where it may be a little bit too much, but if you can stomach some of the issues I talked about before, I think you'll be able to enjoy this book just fine and be able to properly get out the message that it is trying to convey. Anyway, I hope you enjoy this not movie review. Stay tuned for my next movie review. And always remember, have a good day, peace out, and goodbye.